topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast, broadcasting live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. This week and every week, we will reach for a higher purpose in money and life, as well as a focus on health and wellness. Now, let's join your host, Bonita Bell Anderson, as together we start with Asking Good Questions.
Hello, welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast. I'm your host, Bonita Bell Anderson, and today we have a fantastic part 2 with Michael Dorfman. We're going to be talking, here's a guy who's 84 and a half years old and hasn't quit and doesn't intend to quit. And so I'd like to invite Michael to the podcast stage.
Hi, Bonita. Great to be here. Hi.
Welcome. Well, like I said, this is he's I'm up in the Pacific Northwest. He is in Mexico, and he is a certified health and nutrition coach, going strong at 84 and 1/2. I used to only do the half, Michael, when I was like 6, and saying I'm 6 and a half, but Michael's doing 84 and a half. So he's a very prolific writer. He's really gotten his act together here later in life with really talking to people and teaching people about plant-based nutrition. And he has one book that we mentioned before was The Thriving Vegan. His second book didn't have anything to do with health and wellness. It had to do with information, and he calls it Information Warfare, The Battle for Truth and Freedom. And his most recent book is The Longevity Wellness Revolution, which we're going to focus on today. And so what we're going to do is it's going to be like practical tools from the blue zones. It should be really interesting. Breath work, intermittent fasting, stress reduction, hot and cold therapy. These are all things that I'm also very interested in. So it should be a great informational time to ask some good questions. So Michael, you were here a couple of months ago in part 1. We ran out of time. We had so much to talk about, and we touched on your toolkit. And so today I want to go deeper. So if you had to name like 2 or 3 practices that have made the biggest difference in your life, what would that be?
Well, I think, to me, one of the basics of long-term health is the fuel you feed your body. So it's plant-based foods. It has to be an integral part. I mean, if you eat other things that may not be that healthy, I don't focus so much on that. What I focus on is introducing more of the good foods, more of the plant-based foods. And the main reason is because of the fiber that we need for our gut health, which is what helps us thrive and helps us strengthens our immune system. So I would say that was number 1. And then breath work and breath holds, we're also called intermittent hypoxia, is another thing that's really been integral for me, especially lately. And the intermittent fasting, which is what I also practice. If we're talking about 3 important lifestyle changes, those will be the 3 top ones, and then you have the other ones, which would be the hot and cold therapy.
Well, let's walk through breath work. Let's go back to that, and let's just mention what does that look like for you? What does breath work like for you?
Okay. Well, I think I'd like to give a little panorama of why this stuff called, this toolkit is so important.
Okay.
So people understand, maybe some of the reasoning behind it. we have a tendency when we get older, especially, is to slow down.
Yeah.
It's to our life slows down. Instead of moving so much, we sit in front of TV, or we're on the cell phones. And so there's a tendency, people retire to just hang out and not to really work that hard. So what is this thing behind what is the reasoning behind this toolkit? And I think the basics is because if we want to live longer, we need to actually do some of the things we don't want to do and we're not accustomed doing, and that is challenging our body and our mind.
Well,
that's why
can I interrupt you for a minute and just say, living long, but I don't want to live longer but be unhealthy. I want to live longer and be vibrant and healthy and moving and doing.
Yeah, well, that's the whole reasoning behind this. What's going to help us do that? And it's actually going in the opposite direction of many of us believe that slowing down is the way to go. And for me, it's the opposite, is actually challenging, becoming more active, our brain becoming more active, our body becoming more active. So this is part of the reasons of this toolkit, which is to challenge the body to keep it vibrant, to keep it developing. Cells change constantly, to help our cells grow, help us challenging. So where our life becomes, instead of slowing down, it becomes.
Oh no. Oh no. I think we've frozen. Well, I think we've frozen just a moment. Michael's got a lot he wants to say about this longevity toolkit. That's including breath work, intermittent fasting, hot and cold therapy, movement, the role of good stress, and then at the end we're going to talk about something that a lot of people overlook, and that's purpose and joy and community in the latter chapters of life. I know for me, I've heard that a lot. We know what he's talking about is people just telling themselves, I'm going to slow down. Oh, it's just because I'm going to slow down. And that is just not the case. In part one, we really touched on the things that he's done to help us stay going longer. And a lot of times this has to do with language. And so that not just talking about vibrant aging, but doing the things that are going to help and going to keep us going. When and what he was discussing was talking about, and I think he's back, was talking about how people just talk themselves into declining. So do you want to keep going on just the whole kind of the framework for this whole idea?
Yeah, sure. I just hope it doesn't go again, the internet. So I'll go ahead. Yeah, sure. So, so these are the tools that I mentioned. And what happens is that when we challenge our body, for example, we go, we do workouts, we do exercise, we lift weights. And what happens when we lift weights? We're challenging the muscles in our body. We have our muscles that are maybe not that strong. So when you go and you start lifting weights, you're challenging your body. So what happens? The body for a while is like, whoops, there's a change here. And the body will, you will destroy cells and tissues in your muscle, in your biceps, for example, and that's going to need to be repaired. So the body is going through this challenge, and then it is going to see it as a challenge, and eventually it will adapt. And it's going to adapt by giving you new cells, new tissues, and you're going to get stronger. So that's what I call is like, that's what the body does. The body sees the challenge, accepts the challenge, and then it adapts to the challenge, and then it makes you better, it makes you healthier. So one of the things that the body does, it releases, when it adapts, it releases feel-good hormones, which we love to have. You start feeling good, and it releases adrenaline, dopamine, oxytocin, which is often called the love hormone, serotonin, and endorphins, which makes us feel good. So when you go through these challenges, even though they may be like not so great at the beginning, so once you get used to it and you see you're getting results, it's like changing your diet, and you may not be into a whole food plant-based or a plant-based diet. Once you start feeling better, maybe you feel more energy, you feel you lose weight or whatever, you say, oh, there's a reason behind it, and you start, feeling good about these things you are doing. So that's what I do, and eventually you develop a mindset, which is what's very important, especially in your later years, that you start living the life of a healthier person in your mind. Right. And then it becomes normal for you. So it's like when you said, 84 and a half, and you said you're 6-year-old and you said 6 and a half, or when you're 10 years old, I can't wait to be 18 or whatever like that. So that's why I use the thing 84. I can't wait to be 85, so I'm 84 and a half. So the thing with breath work, which you mentioned, breath work, there's two parts to it. And one of the parts is the breath work that I use to calm down, especially when I'm getting close to sleeping. The time to rest, because the energy system that we have. The nervous system, we have the sympathetic nervous system, and we have the active one, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is controlled by the cortisol, which is stress hormones and things like that, which is very important for us to enjoy the day. We wake up, cortisol is very active, and we're ready to go. So when you go into the later, the evening, so you want the parasympathetic to click in, and that's when you start slowing down. You feel calm, you're in resting, and that's when prepares you for sleep. So the breath holds, for me, works in a sense of when you're too active and you're getting closer to going to sleep and you're having a hard time because watching too much TV or you're on your phone, etc. So you want to calm down. So you go into breath work, which you start breathing according to what's the type of breathing you need to slow down your nervous system. And it's a breath work. It's 4 breaths in. There's different ways. 4 breaths in and 8 breaths out, or 5 breaths in. So then you do this repeatedly, and then all of a sudden your heartbeat starts slowing down. I mean, this is real. This is what happens. So you can actually, the breath is an incredible thing. It's one of the few parts of our body that we can control. The heartbeat, all the other things, digestive system. Yeah, we can't control. This is one thing you can control. So that's what breath work does. And then I talk about the breath hold, which is the intermittent hypoxia, which is actually it connects you to yourself. And it's a terrific experience because it's another way you're challenging your body, and you're breathing in. It's a procedure. It's a rhythm. And then you breathe in, and then you hold your breath, and then you breathe out. And it gets to the point when you're going through, I do different types of breath holds. One is 20 minutes, the other 35, 40 minutes. but it leaves you with such an incredible sensation of peace and vibration and energy at the same time.
Awesome.
And when you go through that and you feel a connection, because your mind is no longer involved, your thoughts are involved, it's a feeling experience that you enjoy. And usually after that, I go straight into meditation, which is like the same rhythm. So that's what breath holds does. And it's, it's just a great experience. And it's part of of what I do. Right.
What's your definition then of intermittent fasting?
Oh, intermittent fasting is going through, not eating after a certain hour at night, right, which for me is 8:00. I don't eat after 8:00. I'd say almost every day, maybe every day. Once in a while, I miss it. So I stop eating at 8:00 at night. And then I start eating at 10:00 the next day, which gives me 14 hours of rest for the body, for the breathing, the cells to repair itself, and rest, gives rest time to eating. And it also helps to find out that, we're so used to eating at certain hours, maybe 3 times a day, that we don't even know if we're eating because we're hungry, but we're eating because we're used to the habit.
Right, it's a habit.
Eating. It's a habit. So this way it gives you time, and you find out, hey, I'm really not that hungry after the 14 hours where I usually eat maybe at 8:00 in the morning instead of waiting till 10:00. And so it gives you an understanding of how, what hunger really is, and when to eat when you want to eat or you feel the hunger. So I do that. But there's another experience of the breath holds, and that is when, when you're usually... you're eating with carbohydrates, is the main human being's main energy source is carbohydrates. And then there are many people, that are, especially on the keto diet, that they go into ketosis, which is when the energy source changes from carbohydrates to fat.
Right.
And that human beings could do that too. And human beings do that. They've done that, in the hunter-gatherers, where they would, because they weren't always getting the food when they needed the food. So then they would eventually go into ketosis, where their body would depend on fat to get them through. Although this is not the primary source that, way back to the apes, and to the early humans, that carbohydrates is the primary source of energy. So what happens when you go into this intermittent fasting is that there reaches a point, usually it's between 13 and 14 hours of fasting, that changes from carbohydrate energy to fat energy. And the body is set into the challenge. And then eventually...
So if you do that, so this is another benefit. I don't know if I really knew that. So you're saying you're going to start burning fat if you do this intermittent fasting thing?
You'll do it, but for a short period. And then you go back to the carbohydrates. So for that short period, it challenges the body, it goes into the fat, and then it will release those hormones again, and then it'll go back to the carbohydrates. So this is the science behind intermittent fasting. And some I do it 14 hours. Some my son does it for 16 hours and 8 hours of eating. In other words, you have an 8-hour window of eating. So he stops eating at 6:00 at night, and he starts like at 10:00 the next morning.
I'm not quite there. I'm trying to stop eating by 6, but I'm like about 8:00. So I'm not quite up to the 10:00 that.
But you're okay. If you stop at 6 and you start and you eat it the next morning at 8, that's at 8 you're a 14-hour fit. So that's perfect. Yeah, cool. And that's what's really needed to go into this change for the body. So once you start doing these changes, you get used to them. You have to start doing, because the mind gets used to it and everything, and then you look forward to it, and it's no big deal. Yeah.
So I'm trying to make sure we get through in the time we have some of these things that are in your toolkit. Let's briefly touch on hot and cold therapy. I've done the whole sauna, cold plunge, sauna, cold plunge. I love the sauna, but Michael, I don't really like the cold plunge, but I'm doing it. What's the benefit of doing that whole hot and cold therapy thing?
Well, it's the same thing. It's just a way of challenging your body, giving it more vibrancy. I mean, what it goes with, because I don't do the plunge, I do the shower, which is easier in some way
Okay.
because, it's not the whole body. My son does the plunge. Both my sons do the plunge. I don't have a way of doing the plunge because there's no place nearby I can do the plunge. So the other option is just going through, I just turn off, I put on the heat, very hot, and then I switch it off and I put on completely, but it's coming from the, the faucet, but it is cold. It's cold because, during the night, San Miguel, where I live, it gets pretty cold. So it's okay for me, but it was very difficult for me. And it's difficult. I think plunging may be the most difficult except because it's so uncomfortable.
I sit there and sing and everything. I'm just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this while I'm sitting there in that cold plunge. Whew.
Yeah, what I do sometimes is I start focusing on my breath. I start focusing on my breath to really just get away from, because it's thinking of like, oh my God, this is terrible, the whole thing. Yeah, right. But once you get into it and once you start doing, and I find out, and I don't know if you experience this, that once you start, and after about a minute or so, your body starts adjusting to it and it doesn't feel that cold anymore. So you have to go through the first part. And it's the same thing with the showers. You go through the first part, this first, half a minute, and then finally it's like, and then you could be there for quite a while if you want. My son, the one who does it, he's in another part of Mexico. He could stay in the water for like 10, 15 minutes, in the plunge. And then he's just, it's like it is, because he's so used to it. But but it's getting used to it, and it's challenged. But that's the whole thing, is like we don't want to be challenged, and we need to be challenged to keep our body vibrant, and we can thrive more, and it increases energy. The same thing when you get out of the cold, it's like there's a vibrancy there, and the same thing happens with the breath holds. There's such an energy in the vibrancy that it feels good, and it's worth it,
I could tell you that when I've done a session of sauna and cold plunge, I feel great afterwards. I'm so happy I've done it afterwards, right? So let's move on to movement. What do you think meaningful movement looks like for somebody that's past 60, 70s, 80s? What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I do is I play pickleball almost 3 to 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. That is so fantastic. I really love it because it challenges all parts of your body. It's like, and because it's a game and it's a competition. You don't even care. You just do it because you're in the game. So it's not really something that it's no big. I'll go through it. No, you love it. And, for many people, for me too, it becomes a habit, addictive, because of these hormones that are, launched. You just feel so great. And I don't know how it is where you are, but we have a great community here. So you're actually getting 2 parts of the deal, because we have a great community, and it's time for socializing. Because we have a lot of Americans coming down here. Well, they're here. It's one of the top retirement areas in Mexico for expats. So we have it, and people just socialize and they make friends. And half of the time you're talking to people waiting for the next game, especially when the times when it's crowded. So many people are waiting for your turn to come up to play. So you're socializing and you're meeting people, and that's what it offers. So to me, pickleball is, I get there early, 8:00 in the morning, and I can play for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then, I go into my rest period, but then I'll make sure that I'll get up, and in the afternoon too, I'll go and do walking, for maybe a half hour, 40 minutes. And during the day, because I have a tendency to, go on the podcast and sit around. I write my articles, and I just remember sometimes I have an alarm, which I get on the internet, that says, okay, half hour is over, you get up. So I get up and move around for 5 or 10 minutes.
Is great.
Yeah. And I also have a stand-up desk here, which I go and I do half of my stuff on this while I'm standing. So that's what it is. Because, from the blue zones, one of the things we learned from all of the blue zones, the 5 blue zones, they had in common was natural movement. It wasn't so much going to a gym. It was they lived their lives actively because, they live in rural areas. So it wasn't big cities. And they moved around a lot. They walked uphill. They walked to work. They were used to this activity, even sitting down and getting up. So they would sit down, and get up and go and move. So it's really important. And I noticed this, because as you get older, your body, you want to make sure your joints are still active, that your blood is still moving at a normal pace, at a good rhythm. So you need to get up. And when you sit down for too long a period of time, problems with your, with the movement of blood, the circulation around your body, or getting stiff in joints, or it's just not healthy. And if you want to be healthy, you got to remember to keep moving, even though the tendency, because of the way the society is to slow down. So really, to be healthy in your later years, you have to do the opposite of what, doctors may tell you to do. Oh, you're retired, don't work anymore, quit your job. It's time to just hang out. And I remember when I was, in my 20s or late, I was a late teenager. I was at university. I used to go down from New York, because I'm from Brooklyn. I don't know if my accent gives it away. So we used to go down. We used to go down to Miami Beach during the winter for a couple of weeks, and I remember the people sitting around there on the small, hotels along the beach, and they would sit and sit and sit, and then it's really, an image that I have from those times. They would just sit and look and talk, and so it wasn't that way of life, but that's what thriving is. And when you can really thrive in your 80s and 90s, it's a whole new era of your life. It's a whole new state. That's why I call it the 5th stage of life, when you can actually thrive from 80s on. Yeah.
Well, we all know the word distress, but you've described good stress, or eustress. Did I say that right? Eustress?
Yeah, eustress is the right word.
It actually needs, right?
What is that?
Something that the body actually needs.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm talking about, short-term stress. And short-term stress, to bring up another reason why it's so important, is that we are in stress a lot, because of life itself. Whether it's our relationships, our economic situation, getting worried about what's happening in the world, it's and what's happening in the economy. It's a reason to be stressed out. And many people live their lives in very low key stress, which is dangerous, because stress can actually cause havoc in the body, no matter what else you do. It's just constant cortisol, which is that, stress hormone. It just, and you can live it and get used to it. It becomes a habit, and people are living their lives in stress, and they don't even realize it because they come used to it. So what eustress is short-term stress. And it's this book that was written by, it's called The Stress Paradox. Short-term stress is healthier than even, than almost anything you can do, because it prepares you to deal with life stress. So that's what the reason short-term stress, called eustress, is what I've been talking about in my toolkit, is short-term stress. So that's why it's useful, because you will be able to, your body will be able to, even though maybe consciously you're not, your body, because it's getting used to dealing with stress, short-term stress, will help you deal with long-term stress and realize it when it comes.
Well, rest and recovery seems to be like the other part of the equation. So how do you build rest and recovery into your week so that the good stress actually pays off?
Well, I do it. I'll tell you what, I do it every day. I don't know when it's going to pay off because I don't really have that much stress in my life. And when I do, if, for example, if I feel like I'm thinking too much at night, or even I get up during the night, it's like, why am I thinking about this stupid thing? I can't go to sleep. I can't go to sleep. So what I'll do is I'll use the breath work, and I'll just do it, and I'll see, and I'll just say, okay. And I know that if I'm thinking too much during the night and I can't fall asleep, like my pulse is going to be more rapid, because that's what the cortisol is doing this. The stress hormone is doing this. So I'll know that this is happening. So what I'll do is I'll go through some breath work, and I'll go through either the 4 in, 8 out, and then eventually what happens is that when you do it after 5 minutes or maybe even longer, you're all of a sudden focusing on your breath. You're not focusing on the thought anymore. And then once you get into it, all of a sudden everything calms down. You're no longer in that, because it's the thought that's causing you not to sleep. And the cortisol is turned on, and it keeps it going. And then you want to find, well, what can I do to turn things around? Right. I don't want to, so that's what they do. That's what I do to turn it around, is go through the breath work. That's what happens.
Because I think sleep is like another one of the legs of this is, wow, protecting and improving sleep becomes more and more and more important.
Tell me about it. It's like, it's really true. And I get up, a man, you get older, you may get up a couple of times, even more to go, and you have to go to pee, at night. So, and then you want to come back and you want to make sure you're going to continue to sleep, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So every time you get up, when you get up to go to the bathroom, coming back, you want to make sure you can go back and then go into the same, because you were sleeping very well, but you have to get up to, to go. I don't know why I brought up this subject, but I did. So anyway, because it's mine. So, but this is, part of it. So, but yeah, this is very important. And that's why it's important going to bed at night, getting close, what is it? Winding down. Right. It's very, and we don't do that. We end up, watching series, of, these violent series where people are killing each other. I think that helps. And, there it is. It's like 9 o'clock at night, and it's like, and you're so hyped up from that, and it makes it hard. So one of the things you can do, and which is a challenge sometimes, is that, from a certain time on, let's say you stop eating at, 6 or 8, and at that time you want to wind down. So instead of watching, TV or going on the phone, late at night, you just want to wind down and do things, maybe reading, not a very, a reading or listening to music.
Like 8 p.m. I'm trying to be just relaxing and reading.
And or listening to music or having a conversation. Sometimes with my wife, I play Scrabble at night. A game thing, something that's not, is not going to, release that hormone, to, excite you during that time. You want the melatonin to kick in, which is the hormone that's supposed to be going on at night. And that's what calmness is, reducing that, the attention.
Well, in part 1, we spoke about why purpose. I want to get into purpose and meaning and the inner life here. You spoke about why purpose matters when we had our part 1. now in this part 2, I want to ask, how does somebody actually find or rebuild a sense of purpose after retirement? Because a lot of times I've seen people's whole purpose in life is tied up in what they do. And so what do you think? How do you rebuild a sense of purpose when life changes?
Well, it's really interesting because I guess you can call it purpose or having meaning in your life, something to live for. And it's really interesting because when I don't know if I mentioned it in the first interview, but when I was in my 20s, I was an avid writer. I used to write a lot. I used to write poetry. And I used to write about that. I was at that time, I was living a hippie life. So I was writing about the Vietnam War and, the establishment. And
did you have a ponytail, Michael?
I sure have long hair way below my shoulders, actually. That's another interview. So anyway, so I was really writing. I was writing. I would carry a book around with me all day. And even when I came down to Mexico, I carried a book with me. I just loved writing. So, and then after, that ended, that part of my life ended, and I got into a normal, acceptable life. I had a job and everything, got married. So everything changed. And I was wondering, I can't write. I always started write. I wanted to write. And I started out there sometimes with a page in front of me, and I was saying, right. And then I started writing that, no, that's stupid. Or, that doesn't mean it. So I couldn't find anything to write about. And it was really interesting because, and then it started out with the health movement that I really got into, and that changed it. So I really liked that. And I don't know. And I got into writing and I got into speaking because I love to speak. You can see I like to speak.
And here you are now podcasting.
Exactly. So I got into that. But that came from the writing. And now I love to speak. And then another thing happened, because another thing I used to do when I was 16, I used to write songs. It was during the 50s. So I'd write rock and roll songs. And a couple of them were pretty good. I never did anything with it.
You're just an old rock and roller, aren't you?
I was old rock and roller, and I love to write songs. So, and then not too long ago, I found out that I could sing, and it came because this guy who had a band. I told him I used to write rock and roll songs when I was 16, and I sang him one of the songs, and he said, "Hey, you should come sing in the band." And I did that. So I sang in a what do you call it? A jug band for 3 years here in San Miguel.
Oh, fun.
So I was a singer, yeah, and I played the kazoo. So these are things, and what I'm trying to say is that there are things we enjoy in our life. When we were younger, maybe we like to sing, maybe we have to write, maybe we painted a little bit, we drew a little bit. We enjoyed being with people. Maybe we were funny, liking to tell jokes. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things that we've learned during our life, maybe when we were younger, and they're still there. So a lot of the things that I came into liking later on in life were there before when I was a kid, and maybe it's, it's there, but I think that we all have things inside of us that we really enjoy doing, but we've forgotten. Maybe this would be something to say, and they're still there. But when we get to the point, we get through the 60s, 70s, and we don't have anything telling us to, revive our life, revitalize what we lived through before. When we get into the 80s, we don't have that anymore. And there's nothing really nobody coaching us, or doctors not telling us, oh yeah, you could thrive in your 80s and 90s.
Yeah, no one's telling you that.
Yeah, so, that's why we have to do it ourselves. That's we have to take responsibility to live that life again so that we can enjoy our 80s as much as we enjoyed our, 30s, 40s, 20s, whatever.
Well, I've what's interesting is I've done a few podcast episodes on travel and living overseas and things like that. And here you are, you've built a life in Mexico. And how much of healthy aging do you think comes down to where and how we choose to live?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it, I've been living in Mexico for a total of about 53 years.
Wow.
So I used to go back, my parents, when they were alive, they lived in Florida. I used to go back and visit. But the one thing about Mexico is, and I think it's great if, people get away from their, from the U.S., they can travel, they can move, but it's different than when you travel as a tourist than when you go and you live in a country and enjoy the country as part of the same way that the people who live there live. And that's what people, and I noticed that.
I totally get you, because we just finished a year-long mission for our church in Hawaii. Completely different than going for a week on the beach.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed that because, the amount of, expats that live here in San Miguel is the thousands of them.
Right.
And a lot of them play pickleball. I'd say maybe 75% of the people who play pickleball here are expats from the U.S., either full-time or they come down, live here 8 months and they go back to the States for a while. But it's amazing how they say, oh, it is such a difference being here in Mexico, because it's just a different lifestyle, and just that change, it's not as stressful as the U.S. You can live on less money. It's just different. The Mexican people are so, they're so warm, and I think that's the way in many parts of the world people find, hey, the people are so warm over here. They really don't care what you believe or, what religion you are, what color you are. This is the way it is here. Everybody's pretty much, dealt with in the same way.
Well, if one of our listeners is inspired by you to redesign their daily life, right, for vitality and longevity, and they want to do that now, what's the first thing you'd tell them to change? Or what would be the first thing for them to look at if they're going, dang it, he's really inspiring me. What would be the first thing that they should look at?
I think the most important thing for me is the fuel you give your body. And I think that's the most important, because that's where it's a challenge for people, because the most popular diet in the U.S. right now, and in the West in general, here in Mexico equally, is the keto diet, which is based on animal products and some fruits, some vegetables. But I'm not here to tell people what not to eat, which a lot of people do. I did that in my first book, Thriving Vegan, because I said you got to be 100% plant-based, whole food plant-based. But I'm not into that much. I think the most important thing for people is to understand the importance of fiber. Because if you understand the importance of having a healthy gut, the microbes in our gut, the amount of importance the microbes in our gut have upon our overall health, and how it affects the inflammation in our body, and the chronic inflammation in our body when we don't have a healthy gut. So fiber is the most important food. It is the food that our good microbes, the good bacteria in our body, love to eat. Right. And they will transform that into short-term fatty acids, which will help our body thrive. And that's why whatever we do with the meat, whatever we do with the dairy, whatever we do with the eggs, okay, bring more fiber-rich plant foods into your diet. And that's what I would say would be the first thing, because 95% of the population of the U.S. do not get even the minimum amount of fiber they should be getting in their diet. For women, it should be, I believe it's 28 grams, and for men it's like 25 grams, and men it's 38 grams of fiber daily, and both get about 15 grams. So, and the idea that, our ancestors, the hunter-gatherers, didn't get fiber and they lived off of fat has lately been proven to be wrong because of the study of the poop that they had fossilized from those times. Okay. And they found out that they ate a lot more fiber from the things they got from the ground, whether it's the tubers, the plant.
Sure.
They ate that, and they did eat animals, it's true. But the animals they ate were wild animals, very little fat. Right. So I would say, okay, and most people who do the keto diet really aren't doing the diet the way it's supposed to be done, because you have to almost completely eliminate any of the carbohydrates in your diet. So forget about that. And you get it. It's obvious you get enough proteins from the plants. I get enough proteins. The animals that are, live off of plants, whether it's the elephants and the gorillas and the hippopotamus and the rhinoceros, and they all get all from plants. So we get enough from plants, and especially from the other nutrients. There's no problem with that. Get more fiber in your diet. So I think once you start getting a little bit success with that, a little bit, making little changes, eating a little bit more, maybe more salad in your daily nutrition, or eating, I eat a lot of oatmeal in the morning, and just introduce that. People love, hummus and, yeah.
Michael, we are out of time.
Okay.
Can you believe it? Well, I think we've asked a lot of good questions about rethinking health and aging and longevity, and hopefully that there's a flyer on my website about Michael. I'm redoing it so that both the information from part 1 and part 2 is on that flyer, but you can go check out his books and take a look at what he's trying to teach people about, because it's certainly working for him. And I think that the principles that he's teaching are incredibly valuable. So with that, Michael, we'll bid you adieu. Go have some fun playing pickleball.
Thank you very much. I will, but not until tomorrow morning.
Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, we hope that you've gained a lot from today's session. Thank you so much for joining us on the Ask Good Questions podcast. We will see you next time.
Today's episode is over, but we did ask good questions again, didn't we? Don't miss out as we broadcast live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. Join Benita Bell Anderson next week for more conversations with experts on finances, retirement, behavioral finance issues, health and wellness, and more. Until then, remember to ask good questions.